When I saw Lauren collapse to the floor, clutching her throat, I knew everything I thought I understood was a lie. It was a quiet moment, the kind you don't expect to be a turning point. The sun filtered softly through the blinds of the brunch room in Charlotte. The air scented with freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries. The chatter of family surrounded us, gentle laughter weaving between clinks of cutlery and the occasional scrape of a chair. But then, in the blink of an eye, that calm shattered. Lauren's face went pale, her hands trembling as she reached for her throat. Panic flared in her eyes, and then she said the words that would change my life forever. "It was meant for you." I still remember how the room fell silent, like the air itself was holding its breath. My husband Ethan looked stunned, but it was Lauren's confession that twisted the knife. For 3 years, I had suffered illnesses so sudden and severe after meals with them that I thought I was losing my mind. But now, it wasn't a mystery anymore. It was deliberate. Poison. Before that day, my life had seemed normal, more than normal, actually. I was a marketing executive, climbing the corporate ladder with a steady hand, a quiet confidence in my voice, and a heart full of ambition. Ethan, my husband, was supportive, or so I believed, and Lauren, his sister, was part of our close-knit little family circle. We'd spend weekends together, sharing meals, celebrating small victories, planning holidays. Our home smelled like fresh linen and jasmine. Ethan's laugh echoed warmly through the halls, and Lauren's presence was constant but never intrusive. I remembered the way Ethan always made sure my favorite tea was ready in the morning, how Lauren would tease me about my penchant for late-night snacks. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, but under the surface, something was breaking. It started with small things, bouts of nausea, headaches that blurred the edges of my days, unexplained dizziness that made me clutch the kitchen counter. At first, I chalked it up to stress. The late nights, the pressure of an upcoming board meeting for the Winslow Global account, and the relentless pace of corporate life. Ethan and Lauren would look concerned but shrugged it off when I mentioned it. Yet, every time we ate together, especially when Ethan prepared the food or Lauren joined us, something was wrong. I felt sick, weak, like my body was betraying me. The symptoms were severe enough to send me home early, even to the hospital once. But doctors could never find a cause. Each test came back normal. Each explanation was a dead end. I kept my fears locked away, unsure if I was imagining things or if there was something sinister I couldn't yet see. That fateful brunch in Charlotte was supposed to be a celebration. Ethan had just closed a small deal, and I was preparing for the biggest presentation of my career. The Winslow account was the pinnacle, a chance to prove myself in a male-dominated industry and to cement my place at the company's head. Lauren had insisted on making coffee that morning, her hands steady as she poured a dark, aromatic brew into the mugs. The scent was unusual, something floral and sharp that lingered in the air longer than coffee usually did. I frowned but didn't say anything. A moment of impulse, maybe instinct, nudged me. When Ethan handed me my cup, I noticed Lauren had hers in the same spot across the table. Without thinking, I swapped our cups, a small smile tugging at my lips. Minutes later, Lauren's face twisted in agony, and then she was on the floor. As I cradled her shaking body, Lauren whispered the truth the poison was for me. For months, years even, she and Ethan had been slowly poisoning me, meticulously dosing meals to sabotage my health and my career. Lauren wanted my clients, my success, and together, they had plotted to destroy me. It was betrayal on a level I had never imagined. The people I loved, my husband, my family, had turned on me in the darkest way possible. I recorded every confession Lauren made that day, her voice trembling with fear and guilt. I kept a detailed log of every illness, every doctor's visit, every moment I felt that creeping sickness after meals with them. It was my shield and my weapon. What came next was a careful, painful process, an investigation that peeled back layers of lies, deception, and cold calculation. Ethan and Lauren were charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Their courtroom faces were void of remorse, but justice found them convicted and sentenced to years behind bars. Now, a year later, I stand not just as a survivor, but as a leader who refused to be broken. I secured the Winslow Global account, steering it to unprecedented success. Every meeting, every decision, every hard-fought victory is a testament to a life reclaimed from betrayal. I learned that true revenge is not in destruction or anger, but in rising, thriving, and living fully beyond the shadows of those who sought to harm you. When I look back on those first years with Ethan and Lauren, it's almost unbelievable how carefully the poison was disguised beneath everyday moments. The subtlety was their greatest weapon. Nothing blatant, just small, incremental doses that would leave me feeling dizzy or nauseous, but never enough to raise immediate alarm. At first, I thought it was just bad luck or stress, a migraine after dinner, a stomachache after brunch. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that the pressure of work was finally catching up with me. After all, being a marketing executive for a major firm wasn't easy. The Winslow Global account was a prize every team fought for, and I was on the brink of leading that charge. I couldn't afford distractions, but the truth was hiding right under my nose, hidden in the warmth of those shared meals, the casual smiles, and the carefully brewed coffee. Our apartment was a quiet sanctuary in Charlotte neutral tones, soft light filtering through linen curtains, and shelves lined with travel, souvenirs, and well-thumbed books. Ethan's presence was everywhere, his shoes by the door, the faint scent of his cologne in the living room, his favorite jazz records softly spinning on the turntable. Lauren came by often. At first, it was innocent enough. She helped with small errands, sometimes cooked dinner, especially when I was working late. She laughed easily, and I thought of her as family, a sister-in-law I could trust. The first time I felt truly ill was after a Sunday brunch we shared at our place. Lauren made her usual coffee, and I remember the aroma was different that day, a little heavier, almost floral. I dismissed it as a new blend she was experimenting with. But soon after that meal, my vision blurred and I doubled over in pain. Ethan was at my side immediately, concerned but trying to keep things calm. I hated to cause a fuss, so I brushed it off as something I ate wrong. Over the months, the episodes became more frequent and intense. Each time, it was after meals with Ethan and Lauren. Sometimes it was a sudden nausea that sent me running to the bathroom. Other times, sharp headaches that forced me to retreat to my bedroom, the world spinning around me. At work, I struggled to maintain focus. My once sharp mind felt foggy. I started carrying a small notebook where I jotted down every symptom, every meal shared with them, every strange taste or smell I noticed. I even began secretly recording some dinners, my phone hidden discreetly on the table. Part of me feared what I might find, but I needed evidence. I needed to understand why my body was betraying me, why the people I loved seemed indifferent to my suffering. I remember one evening, Ethan tried to soothe me after a particularly bad episode. He held my hand and whispered, "Maybe it's just the stress, Brooke. You've been pushing yourself too hard." But his eyes flickered with something else, a hesitation I didn't understand then. Lauren was quiet that night, her smile forced, her eyes darting nervously. I wondered if she could see the doubt growing inside me. The turning point came unexpectedly during that family brunch in Charlotte. We were celebrating Ethan's latest success at work. A small victory, but a meaningful one. Lauren insisted on making the coffee, her hands steady but her smile tight. The scent was unmistakably strong floral, almost perfumed, far from the usual earthy aroma I expected. My heart pounded, but I pushed the thought away. When Ethan handed me my cup, I noticed Lauren's in the same spot opposite me. Without thinking, I swapped the cups, an instinctive move fueled by a whisper of suspicion that I could no longer ignore. What happened next felt like slow motion. Lauren's face twisted in pain. She clutched her throat and collapsed. Chaos erupted around us. As I knelt beside her, fear and confusion consumed me. Lauren's voice trembled as she confessed the unthinkable. The poisoning was meant for me, carefully planned to stop me from leading the Winslow Global account. She said Ethan was the mastermind, her partner in this dark scheme. Their jealousy and greed had driven them to months of silent cruelty, dosing me with poison to weaken me, to derail my career. Hearing those words shattered something inside me. But amid the shock, a quiet resolve began to grow. I couldn't let them win. Over the next weeks, I worked with investigators, sharing my recordings and symptom logs. The evidence was painstakingly gathered, revealing a chilling pattern of betrayal. The courtroom was cold, the air heavy with judgment. Ethan and Lauren sat side by side, faces blank, while I recounted the pain, the fear, and the betrayal. They were found guilty, charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Justice, slow but sure, had caught up with them. And me? I emerged on the other side, scarred but stronger. The Winslow Global account, once a battleground of sabotage and deceit, became my proving ground. I led the team with a fierce determination, turning challenges into opportunities. Each successful campaign was a quiet victory, proof that resilience, not bitterness, is the most powerful revenge. In the weeks following Lauren's collapse and her confession, my world felt like it was both falling apart and being rebuilt all at once. I remember sitting alone in our apartment late at night, the hum of the city outside barely piercing the silence. The dim glow of the street lamp filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows on the walls. I traced my fingers over the little notebook where I had kept my symptom logs, the diary of a nightmare no one else saw. The worst part wasn't just the poison itself. It was the betrayal, the knowledge that Ethan, the man I trusted most, had stood over me with a silent hand, slowly breaking me down, all so his sister Lauren could steal my clients, my career, my future. For years, I had seen Ethan as my partner in life, the man who listened when I needed to vent, who held my hand through the chaos of deadlines and meetings. I thought we were a team. But as the truth unraveled, I realized how little I really knew about him. In court, the prosecution painted a picture of a cold, calculating duo. Ethan, the charming husband with a silver tongue, and Lauren, the envious sister eager to climb her own ladder by any means necessary. Their scheme was methodical. Small doses, carefully measured to keep me weak, but never so sick that I'd suspect poisoning. They documented their actions in secret journals, logs of doses, notes about my symptoms. It was chilling. The investigation revealed the full extent of their cruelty. Ethan had been the one preparing the meals and drinks that made me sick. Lauren provided the poison and motivation. Their goal was to destroy my credibility at work, to have me pulled from leading the Winslow Global account so Lauren could step in and take over. I remember sitting through the hearings, listening to testimony after testimony. It was surreal, like watching a nightmare play out from the outside. But inside, I was burning with a quiet rage. After the verdict, Ethan and Lauren were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. I didn't feel triumph as much as a heavy relief. Justice had been served, but the wounds they left behind were deep. My relationship with Ethan was over. The man I had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by a stranger whose betrayal cut deeper than any poison. In the aftermath, I focused all my energy on rebuilding myself and my career. The Winslow Global account was a beast complex, demanding and fiercely competitive, but it became my redemption. I worked long hours, led meetings with renewed vigor, and surrounded myself with a team I could trust. Slowly, the fog of betrayal lifted, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. What surprised me most was how much strength I found in forgiveness. Not for Ethan or Lauren, but for myself. I forgave myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for trusting too deeply. And I forgave the pain, knowing it had shaped me into someone stronger. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world feels still, I think about how close I came to losing everything. But those thoughts don't haunt me anymore. Instead, I hold on to this lesson. The best revenge isn't bitterness or anger. It's living fully, rising above betrayal, and proving that no one else gets to define your worth. The day I finally confronted Ethan and Lauren after Lauren's collapse remains vivid in my memory, not just because of the confrontation itself, but because of the raw emotions that surged through me like a tidal wave I hadn't anticipated. I remember the sterile smell of the hospital waiting room, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the sun outside. My hands trembled, clutching my phone tightly as I waited for Lauren to regain enough composure to speak. When she finally did, her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice shaky and haunted by guilt. "I'm sorry, Brooke," she whispered, barely audible over the beeping of machines. "It was supposed to stop at the poisoning to make you too weak to lead the meeting. I never wanted it to go this far." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt betrayal pierce every fiber of my being. This wasn't just a family betrayal, it was a calculated act of sabotage and attempted murder. The very people who were supposed to love and protect me had become my greatest enemies. Later, when Ethan was brought in for questioning, his cold demeanor unsettled me. His charm had always been his armor, but now it felt like a mask hiding something far darker. "I never wanted to hurt you, Brooke," he said smoothly. "It was Lauren's idea. I didn't think it would go this far." His words rang hollow, hollow as the space where trust used to live. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined. The long months of mysterious illnesses, the sleepless nights wondering if my body was failing me, were orchestrated with chilling precision. Lauren and Ethan had kept detailed logs, doses, symptoms, timings, as if poisoning me was a scientific experiment. It was a cold, calculated plan to tear me down and take everything I had worked for. When I sat down with my lawyer to prepare for court, I felt a strange mix of numbness and determination. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I handed over every piece of evidence: recordings from our dinners, my symptom diary, Lauren's confession. The courtroom felt heavy with tension as the case unfolded. Witnesses spoke of the suspicious patterns. Doctors testified about unexplained symptoms, and the prosecution painted a clear picture of conspiracy and attempted murder. Watching Ethan and Lauren in court, I saw not the people I once loved, but two strangers who had betrayed me beyond repair. Their conviction and sentencing were a relief, but the emotional scars would take longer to heal. In the months after, I found solace in work. The Winslow Global account, once a battleground of manipulation and fear, became a symbol of my strength and resilience. Each successful campaign was a quiet victory, proof that I was more than the sum of their betrayal. But healing was not just about success. It was about learning to trust again myself, my instincts, and the future. I surrounded myself with friends and colleagues who lifted me up, who believed in me without hesitation. And slowly, I began to forgive not for their sake, but for mine. Revenge isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's the quiet, steady reclaiming of your own life, piece by piece, day by day. That's what I chose to do. After the courtroom drama ended and Ethan and Lauren were taken away, The silence that settled over my world felt both suffocating and strangely freeing. The man I once called my husband, the sister-in-law I trusted like family, were gone. But I was still here, bruised, but unbroken. The first weeks were the hardest. I struggled with waves of disbelief, sorrow, and a deep, gnawing loneliness. Our apartment, once filled with laughter and the scent of fresh coffee, felt cold and empty. The memories of betrayal echoed in every corner. I remember one night in particular, sitting on the floor of the living room, the dim light casting long shadows. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. Tears for the trust lost, for the years wasted in fear and doubt. But amid that darkness, a tiny spark of resolve began to glow. I threw myself into work, not as a distraction, but as a declaration. The Winslow Global account was the moment I had fought so hard for, and I wasn't going to let anyone steal it from me, not again. I rebuilt my team, carefully choosing people who valued integrity and collaboration. I led meetings with a new fire, fueled by the knowledge that I had survived something unimaginable and come out stronger. One afternoon, during a high-stakes pitch to the Winslow board, I remember feeling calm and focused, despite the butterflies in my stomach. The room was filled with executives, their eyes sharp, their questions pointed. But I spoke with clarity and conviction, weaving stories that connected with their vision, showing them the potential of what we could achieve together. When the meeting ended, the applause was soft but genuine. That day, I realized I wasn't just winning clients, I was reclaiming my identity. I also found strength in forgiveness, not to excuse what Ethan and Lauren had done, but to free myself from the bitterness that could have swallowed me whole. I forgave myself for trusting too much, for not listening to my instincts sooner. I forgave the pain, knowing that holding on to anger would only chain me to the past. Today, a year later, I lead the Winslow Global account with pride. My team respects me, clients trust me, and I wake up each morning knowing I am no longer a victim. I am a survivor, a leader, and a woman who refused to be defined by betrayal. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't about punishment. It's about living fully, embracing your worth, and proving that even in the darkest moments, light can break through. The truth, once it surfaced, didn't just stay locked within the walls of our courtroom. It spilled out into the world around me, into the office corridors, into whispered conversations at industry events, even into the awkward silence at family gatherings. The betrayal wasn't mine alone to bear anymore. It became public, undeniable. At work, the revelation rocked the company. People who had once admired Ethan's polished charm now looked at me with a new kind of respect, an understanding of the storm I had weathered. The Winslow Global account, once a symbol of pressure and sabotage, was now my flagship triumph. I remember the first day back at the office after the sentencing. The scent of freshly brewed coffee greeted me, mingling with the faint rustle of papers and the click of keyboards. The rhythm of work felt strangely grounding, a steady heartbeat pulling me forward. My team welcomed me with quiet smiles, a subtle but powerful affirmation that I wasn't alone. They had stood by me through the rumors, through the whispered doubts, and now, together, we were moving ahead. Social circles shifted, too. Some relatives kept their distance, unwilling or unable to face the family fracture. Others reached out cautiously, their voices laced with sympathy and curiosity. The man I once called my husband was gone not just physically, but in every way that mattered. His absence was a heavy space, but it no longer weighed me down. I filled it with work, friendships, and the rediscovery of who I was beneath the layers of betrayal. Lauren's fall from grace was swift and undeniable. Once confident and poised, her courtroom demeanor cracked under the weight of truth. Her dreams of climbing the corporate ladder on my back lay in ruins. Yet, even as justice was served, I couldn't let myself celebrate cruelty. I reminded myself that punishment was not the goal, restoration was. And for me, restoration meant reclaiming my life, my health, and my peace. One evening, months after the trial, I found myself walking through a quiet park near my apartment. The air was crisp, tinged with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. The city lights twinkled softly, distant but reassuring. I paused by a bench and sat, feeling the cool wood beneath me. In that stillness, I realized how far I had come, not just from the betrayal, but from the fear and uncertainty that had once ruled me. Justice had been served, but healing was my true victory. Healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet mornings when the sunlight spills through your window and you wake without the weight of dread pressing on your chest. It comes in soft laughter with friends who remind you what trust feels like. It comes in the small, steady moments when you realize you are no longer defined by the worst thing that happened to you. For me, healing began in those simple moments. In the months after the trial, I started to rebuild not only my career but my inner life. I took up yoga, something I'd never tried before. and found that the slow, deliberate movements helped untangle the tension that had wrapped itself around me for years. The steady rhythm of breath in and out became a reminder that I was alive, that my body was mine again. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had quietly supported me, but were too cautious to ask questions. Over cups of chamomile tea and long walks, I shared parts of my story I hadn't dared speak aloud before. Their empathy and strength helped me carry the burden I thought I'd carry alone. At work, I continued to lead the Winslow Global account with renewed passion and clarity. My team wasn't just colleagues. They became my family, a circle of trust I had thought lost forever. Together, we achieved milestones that once seemed impossible. The board meetings that had once filled me with anxiety were now stages where I spoke with authority and conviction. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But the most profound change was inside me. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing. It was about freeing myself from the poison of resentment. I forgave Ethan and Lauren not for their sake, but for mine. I forgave myself for the times I doubted my instincts, for the moments I felt weak. And I embraced the woman I had become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, I thought about the road that had brought me here. The betrayal, the pain, the long journey through fear and uncertainty. And I realized that I had a choice: to let the past define me, or to use it as a foundation for a new life. I chose the latter. I've shared my story with you, the betrayal, the pain, and the quiet strength it took to rebuild. It hasn't been easy. Some days, the memories still whisper in the corners of my mind. But I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there is light to be found. Betrayal by those closest to us cuts deep, but it doesn't have to define who we become. We have the power to rise, to heal, and to live fully again. Now, I want to ask you, what would you do if someone you trusted tried to tear your life apart? Would you find the strength to forgive? To fight? To rebuild? Every story is different, but the lesson is the same. Resilience is born in the quiet moments, in the choices we make every day. If this story touched you, if it gave you hope or made you think, please share your thoughts. Your voice matters. And if you want to hear more stories that remind us of the strength and complexity of family and trust, subscribe and join our community. Thank you for listening. Remember, no matter what you face, you're not alone.